Sadly, we've just had another fatal crash Wednesday night at Montgomery Field in San Diego, the same airport where the Cessna 340 crash occurred that we talked about in episode 301. In this case, it was a Cessna P210 that was landing after a long half-hour flight from Northern California. Although the crash happened only a day ago, there's little doubt about why it crashed, as the pilot mentions it shortly before the crash. In a moment, we'll talk about the flight, play the ATC tapes, and talk about what went wrong. Hello again, and welcome to Aviation News Talk. My name is Max Trescott. I've been flying for 50 years. I'm the author of several books and the 2008 National Flight Instructor of the Year. And my mission is to help you become the safest possible pilot. If you're new to the show, well, take a moment right now and touch either the subscribe key or, if you're using the Apple Podcast app, the follow key, so that next week's episode is downloaded for free. And if you didn't hear Wednesday's episode about the Cessna 340 crash, you may want to check it out at aviationnewstalk.com/301. Now, the story of the Cessna P210 that crashed in Southern California was on my local news as the aircraft departed earlier in the day from the Concord, California airport about 30 miles north of me in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was able to read the N number off the TV screen, N1400, which is how the pilot referred to his plane on the ATC tapes. I looked at the flight track on flightaware.com and was surprised to see that the flight lasted for 4 hours and 1 minute. 20 years ago, I owned a Cessna T210 with a partner, so I'm very familiar with these planes. The accident aircraft was a 1979 P210, a pressurized version of my plane, which has a fuel capacity of 90 gallons. These planes burn around 18 gallons per hour, but in climb they probably burn closer to 37 gallons per hour. So in general, you wouldn't want to fly much more than 4 hours. Checking the route, I saw that the accident airplane didn't originally plan to fly to Montgomery Field. From past flight data, it appears that the aircraft is based at F-70, the French Valley Airport, and indeed, the aircraft first flew an approach to French Valley, didn't land, and then went missed. Historical METAR data shows that the weather there, at the time of the pilot's approach, was reported as winds 030 at 3, 4-mile visibility and light rain, overcast at 600 feet, temperature 12, dew point 12, and altimeter 3005. The field elevation there is 1,350 feet, so the cloud bases would have been around 1,950 feet MSL. The only instrument approach to French Valley is the RNAV GPS-18, and it has LPV minimums of 1,600 feet or 200 feet AGL. So theoretically, the pilot should have been able to break out of the clouds at 1,950 feet and still descend another 350 feet until reaching the 1,600-foot minimums. However, from FlightAware's ADS-B data, it appears the pilot was high on the approach and was late to get down to minimums. ADS-B data altitude is based on standard pressure of 29.92, but the local barometer was 30.05. So I've added 100 feet to the altitude shown in FlightAware to get altitudes that are probably closer to the aircraft's actual altitude. As the aircraft crossed the runway threshold, it was still at 2,000 feet or 400 feet above minimums. Based on our cloud calculations, it may have still been in the clouds, though about to break out. The French Valley Airport is 6,000 feet long, and as the plane reached the far end of the runway, it was at 1,800 feet. It finally reached the 1,600-foot minimums when it was 1.1 nautical miles beyond the airport. So to say this was a poorly flown approach is a vast understatement. That the pilot continued to descend for another mile beyond the airport shows an alarming lack of situational awareness. Note that it was about 8:30 p.m. at night, completely dark and stormy, which always makes flying more difficult. The pilot switched back to March approach control on the mist, and initially we can't hear the pilot since he's at a lower altitude, though we can hear the controller. It's apparent that the pilot is not following the mist approach, but is just continuing to fly southeast. So he's flown a poor instrument approach and then not followed the missed approach procedure. So these are two big red flags.
Number 1400, Mark George Roger, again. Greater East for the missed approach. 1400 Roger, and confirm you're in the right hand towards the ship. Do not have the weather on you. I'm just confirming that you're in the right hand towards the ship. 1400 Roger, are you doing the missed approach or are you just departing southbound via pod? Okay, that's why I was wondering if you were turning for test. 1400, turn right heading 360.
The controller then gives the pilot the weather for McClellan Palomar Airport, which is 500 feet overcast, 10-mile visibility in light rain. She also tells him twice to turn to heading of 360, so apparently he's been slow to follow her instructions. She then reads a very long clearance to get there, even though the airport is just 28 miles away. Now, back east where things are flat, you often get direct clearances. But here in California, we often get long clearances. Here's what it sounded like.
Airport is cleared to Palomar Airport, Charlie Romeo, Quebec, via direct Homeland, Hotel Delta Foxtrot, and Paradise, Tropico, Victor 186, Robin, Romeo, Oscar, Bravo, December, November, Victor 458, Oceanside, direct, 5,000, expect 7,000.
Rather than give a readback, the pilot says to stand by and says something about his charts. 2 minutes later, the controller asks if he's ready to do a readback of the clearance, and he says negative, something about charts, and says he'd like to just get a direct clearance to Palomar. She then says she'll just vector him around her airspace until he's ready. The vectors are taking the plane north away from Palomar, so he's asked if he can be vectored south toward Palomar.
Would it be possible to vector us southbound towards Palomar, sir?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Would it be possible to vector us southbound towards Palomar?
I have to give you the clearance I just gave you. Okay, stand by.
Thank you.
Okay, so SoCal, I think we'll try to be able to vector you to it. They said turn left heading 180, trying to maintain 7,000, and then radar vector.
Roger, left to 180, come on, maintain 7,000 for Century and 1400. Thanks very much, ma'am.
So the controller has come up with a great solution. She's gotten SoCal to agree to vector this pilot to Palomar rather than have to fly a complicated route to get there. She then switches him to SoCal, but we can't hear the controller on this recording. Earlier, the pilot said something about a VOR, so perhaps since he had problems flying the GPS approach into French Valley, he just wants to fly either a VOR or ILS approach with his nav receiver. SoCal then offers him some other approach type, and here's how that conversation goes. And by the way, I've removed spaces from these transmissions and many of the other transmissions that I'm playing here, just to save some time.
We won't be able to take that because we have just a VOR approach.
But flying the VOR approach at Palomar doesn't make a lot of sense, as it's a circling approach, and its minimums are 1,300 feet MSL, which is 969 feet AGL. But the weather was reported to be 500 feet overcast, so this can't work. Later, the pilot figures that out, but for some reason, he still doesn't want a GPS approach.
SoCal Centurion 1400, good evening. This is 5,000. Heading 170.
November 1400, SoCal approach, Roger. Expect VOR approach Palomar. Report when you have the weather. November 1400, SoCal, how do you hear?
Loud and clear, sir. Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, report with information, Juliet at Palomar, and you want the VOR approach, correct?
That's correct.
Roger, report with the weather. Miramar altimeter 3001.
3001, thank you. SoCal Centurion 1400, we'll try to get this Palomar. Do you have any place within ILS that I can make a landing there?
Centurion 1400, the Montgomery has an ILS approach, but their weather is, looks like it's a little bit better, but still 2 miles visibility, light rain, mist, scattered clouds at 300. Would you like the ILS approach to it right there?
We'll try to ILS turn right at Montgomery.
Centurion 1400, Roger, report when you have information, Sierra at Montgomery. Here's to Montgomery Airport via radar vectors. In disregard. November 1400, report with the weather at Montgomery.
Roger, we'll try.
Centurion 1400, cleared to Montgomery via radar vectors. Fly present heading, maintain 5,000.
Maintaining 5,000, and would you be so kind to give me the airport identifier for Montgomery? Is it AMG?
Centurion 1400, front of it's Mike Yankee Foxtrot. Sorry, Mike Yankee Foxtrot for Montgomery.
Yankee Foxtrot, Mike Yankee Foxtrot, thank you, sir. SoCal Centurion 1400, we have the weather at Montgomery.
Centurion 1400, roger. I just want to verify you do want to continue for the ILS approach still.
That's affirmative.
Roger. Centurion 1400, I see you. Hi, Danny. Are you trying to reach me?
Negative. Our transponder seems to be running continuously for some reason.
Roger.
Now that seems a little unusual. In some transponders, the reply light will run continuously if you're being continuously swept by radar. Pushing the ident button does nothing to change that. And with an ILS coming up to fly, it seems the pilot is slightly distracted when he has other higher priorities. It's nearly 9 p.m. now, and SoCal advises the tower will be closing soon and also passes along the latest weather.
Centurion 1400, the Montgomery Tower will be closing up here shortly, just as a heads up.
1400, roger. As long as we can land it, that would be great.
Centurion 1400, I have an updated weather from Montgomery Tower if you're ready to copy.
Affirmative, go ahead.
And Centurion 1400, 0453 observation, wind 020 at 4, 3 miles visibility, light rain, mist, ceiling broken 500, additional ceiling broken at 1,200, overcast 1,700, altimeter 3001.
1400, copy. Thank you, sir. Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, contact approach on 124.35.
2435. Thanks for your help, Centurion 1400.
So the weather isn't great at 500-foot overcast, but everything sounds normal when the aircraft checks in with SoCal on the approach frequency for the ILS-28 right into Montgomery Field. Coincidentally, that's the same approach the Cessna 340 flew that we talked about in episode 301. The aircraft checked in at 5,000 feet. Here's what that sounded like from his first check-in until the aircraft was switched to advisory frequency for Montgomery Field. I've removed other aircraft transmissions and pauses to shorten the clip. This clip begins at about 9:02 p.m., which is 2 minutes after the tower closed at Montgomery Field.
Port Centurion 1400, level 5,000, behalf the IDIS.
Centurion 1400, SoCal, roger. Just going to maintain 4,000.
Roger, leaving 544, Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, the tower, they closed up about 4 minutes ago. You'll have to cancel me in the air. On the ground with the 1-800 number. Do you have that number? Centurion 1400, SoCal?
Go ahead, SoCal, Centurion 1400.
The tower, they closed up about 5 minutes ago, so you'll have to cancel your ISR in the air with me on the ground with the 1-800 number. Do you have that 1-800 number?
Do have the number 800 number, yes.
Okay, thank you. Centurion 1400, fly heading 160.
Roger, 160 for Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, sliding 250, intercept final approach course.
250 on heading and intercept the course, Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, you're 3 miles heading, maintain 3,000 until established at third ILS, runway 28 right approach.
Roger, maintain 3,000 and clear for ILS, approach Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, and you can change to advisory. Self-submit cancel within 5 minutes of landing, or you can try on this frequency if you break out of the files. I do have a Cirrus waiting to go on behind you.
1400, Roger, thank you, man.
Centurion 1400, SoCal, are you still up? No.
That's affirmative.
Change to the advisory from Montgomery and tell Centurion 1400 that he's going south off the course.
Most of these transmissions sounded fairly normal. The pilot did miss one radio call, which is not terribly unusual. In the last transmissions, we can see that the pilot was told to switch to advisory frequency, but failed to do so. We know that because 33 seconds after that instruction, the controller said, Centurion 1400 SoCal, are you still up? 1.5 seconds later, the controller started another transmission, probably to another aircraft. A half second later, the accident aircraft replied affirmative, cutting out part of the controller's transmission, and then we hear the controller telling presumably another aircraft on frequency to switch to advisory and advise the accident aircraft that he is south of the localizer. Another 33 seconds later, the accident aircraft is apparently still on the approach frequency as we hear a series of clicks on that frequency, which sound like the accident aircraft trying to activate the pilot-controlled lighting at Montgomery Field. The pilot apparently realizes his error, as 45 seconds later, we hear a similar series of clicks on the Montgomery Field CTAF frequency. At this point, the pilot is about 1.6 miles from the threshold at 900 feet, and he's to the right of the localizer, and in a left turn that will take him to the south side of the localizer, where he will remain as he passes by the airport. There's a similar series of clicks 6 seconds later, and 16 seconds after that, there's another series of clicks. But at no time do we ever hear the pilot speak on the CTAF frequency, though other aircraft can be heard. Meanwhile, back on the SoCal frequency, the controller is advising a Cirrus aircraft who was to follow the accident aircraft on the approach of a possible delay.
Marie Charlie Zulu, fighting 330.
30, Charlie.
Marie Charlie Zulu, I'm waiting for Centurions to cancel, but I'm not going to lie to you. Kind of just flying over the airport and still westbound at 600 feet.
Oh boy, okay, yeah. No worries, Zulu.
7 Marie Charlie Zulu, fly heading 290.
290, Charlie Zulu.
Marie Charlie Zulu, can I get you to switch over to the Montgomery Advisory and try and get this Centurion back on our frequency?
I'll hop over and see if I can get him.
Put him on 25.3, please.
25.3, yeah, I'll let him know.
As I mentioned before, as the accident pilot was trying to turn on the lights, he was in a left turn that would take him across the localizer. He then remained left of the localizer and of the airport. As he passed the runway threshold, he was about 2,150 feet, or about a third of a nautical mile, to the left of runway 28 right. He was also at about 600 feet, or approximately 200 feet AGL, and he flew the entire length of the airport, roughly parallel to the runway at that altitude, while offset to the left of the airport the entire time. He then flew a full mile past the airport at that low altitude before starting to climb. You may recall that SoCal asked another aircraft to call the accident aircraft on the CTAF, but less than 2 seconds after SoCal made that request, the accident aircraft came back on frequency and reported that he was flying the missed approach. The following transmissions are in real time with no spaces removed.
Cessna 1400, we're making a miss. We can't see the runway.
Centurion 8 Charlie Zulu, stay with me. Centurion 1400 SoCal, get radar contact and climb immediately to 3,000.
Up immediately to 3,000. Centurion 1400.
Centurion 1400, low altitude alert. Check your altitude immediately. Minimum vectoring altitude, your area is 2,100 and maintain 3,000 safe.
Yeah, I'd like to shoot another one, but we're running out of fuel too.
Okay, how much fuel do you have left?
Very few minutes. We just need to get as fast as we can on the ground.
Montgomery Charlie Zulu, turn left heading 200.
Turn 200, Charlie Zulu.
United 540, fighting 260.
260, United 540.
Centurion 1400, I need you to climb immediately and turn back to the west. Fly heading 270 and climb.
Departure Skywest 3911, 1.1, climb via the Echo 2.
Skywest 3911 SoCal, radar contact, climb maintain 15,000.
Climb directly 15,000, Skywest 3911.
Marie Charlie Zulu, descend and maintain 4,200.
1,200, Charlie Zulu.
After 30 seconds of no transmissions, we hear the following exchanges, which are in real time with no spaces removed.
Centurion 1400, turn right heading 360.
Right, 360, Cessna 1400.
Seven Marie Charlie Zulu, and mid-altitude maintain 5,000.
1,008, Charlie Zulu.
Marie Charlie Zulu, flighting 180.
80, Charlie Zulu.
Marie Charlie Zulu, I'm going to let the Centurion, since he says he's low on fuel, I'm going ahead of you, and then I'll bring you back around here.
Cessna 1400, we lost a lot of fuel, so we have to make emergency landing somewhere. We can't get anything.
Centurion 1400, turn right heading 090.
Right, 090.
Centurion 1400, flighting 100.
100, roger.
Centurion 1400, and are you completely out of fuel?
Affirmative.
Centurion 1400, there's a runway right off your right, 1 o'clock at 2 miles. Centurion 1400, 1400, 12 o'clock, 2 miles. There's a runway. Centurion 1400, if you can hear me, off your left now. 11 o'clock and 2 miles.
11 o'clock, 2 miles.
Centurion 1400, just continue a right-hand turn. A right-hand turn to a 90 heading. Continue east, there's a runway right off your right.
Heading D1?
Go eastbound, 90 heading. There's a runway a mile and a half off your right. Turn to the east, turn to the east. Number 8 Charlie Zulu, turn left heading 090.
090, Charlie Zulu. SoCal Medevac 149, Whiskey 4000, climb via the Falk 1, 10,000.
Medevac 9 Whiskey, SoCal, radar contact, climb maintain 10,000.
10,000, 149, Whiskey.
Scout is 3911, approach 125.3.
25.3, turn 11.
SoCal, Scorch 56 is with you 10,000 feet.
Scorch 56, approach 125.3.
125.3.
Medevac 9 Whiskey, approach 125.3 and stop at 9,000. 9,000, 125.3.
53, 9,000, 149, Whiskey, yeah.
Number 8 Charlie Zulu, fighting 360.
60, 130.
24 seconds later, we hear this.
Number 8 Charlie Zulu, can I get you to fly over an area and see if you can see anything for me here?
I can give it a shot. It's pretty thick. I can see right now, though.
8 Charlie Zulu, turn left heading 270.
270, 8 Charlie Zulu.
Charlie Zulu, disregard, we're just going to take you into Montgomery here. 290 heading, just going to maintain 5,000.
290 down to 5,000, 8 Charlie Zulu. You want me to try that? I don't mind.
Say it again.
If you want me to try that, I don't mind, 8 Charlie Zulu.
I don't think so.
Get the altitude one more time.
Scorch 56, SoCal.
Initially, the controller asks Cirrus to fly overhead the accident site. She then wisely decides to send the aircraft directly to Montgomery Field to land. After all, the weather is poor, and the odds of spotting the downed aircraft are slim. Oddly, there's another aircraft on frequency that's managing a low fuel situation.
United 540, turn right 010.
Return 010, United 540.
United 540, let's make it a 30 heading, please.
30 heading, United 540.
We're still good on your fuel, right?
Yes, man. We've got about 10 minutes to play with.
10.
2 minutes later, there's a controller change. It was undoubtedly traumatic for the controller to deal with the downed aircraft, and in general, ATC will rotate controllers after there's been an accident. After passing the airport, the accident aircraft remained in the air for just 5.5 minutes. He executed a series of turns, but was unable to locate the runway that the controller was directing him toward. At the time the engine quit, the aircraft was at 3,000 feet and about 2.6 nautical miles from the threshold of runway 6 left at Miramar Marine Corps Air Station. Oddly, instead of turning east toward the airport, he turned west toward the coast, flying away from the airport. The plane crashed at about 9:30 p.m. in a wooded area near La Jolla, California, just south of UC San Diego. The aircraft was located by a police drone. Now, we don't know for sure who was piloting the aircraft, though it was likely the owner of the aircraft, who reported that he had over 17,000 hours, holds an ATP certificate, and had multiple type ratings, including Boeing 727, 737, 747, and Douglas DC-3, DC-4, DC-10, and also Cessna citation ratings. Now, sadly, about 9% of all non-commercial fixed-wing aircraft accidents involve fuel mismanagement, including running out of fuel. And surprisingly, it's not just low-time pilots who run out of fuel. Now let's talk about a few aspects of this crash. First, the pilot was probably tired after the long 4-hour flight. It was nighttime and the weather was stormy, and the pilot had many problems during the flight. First, he flew 2 instrument approaches poorly, and in both cases wasn't in a position to be able to see the airport and land. And in both cases, rather than going mist and start to climb at the decision altitude, which is required if you don't have the airport in sight, he continued to fly along at low altitude looking for the airport. So clearly he was weak on his instrument procedures. He may also have been having some equipment problems. It was fairly clear that after flying the RNAV GPS approach into French Valley, that he didn't want to use GPS again for the second approach. We'll probably never know whether that was because of equipment problems or some lack of familiarity with how to use the GPS. He was also making more mistakes at the end of the flight. We heard him miss one radio call. Then he forgot to switch to advisory frequency. We know that because he replied when the controller called him, even though it was after the pilot had already acknowledged the change to advisory frequency. Then after his second switch to advisory, we know he still hadn't switched over, as we could hear him clicking on the SoCal frequency as he was trying to turn on the lights at Montgomery Field. Once again, the pilot may have gotten distracted by clicking the lights on 4 times on 2 different frequencies. Meanwhile, he was right of course, and then later a third of a mile left of course. Oddly, he never made a single voice transmission on the Montgomery CTAF frequency. Now that's a big error, as one should always announce their position and their intentions on the CTAF frequency. Now I can't help but wonder if this pilot might have succeeded if he'd arrived 20 minutes earlier when the tower was still open. The lights would have already been on, so he wouldn't have been distracted by that, and the tower could have let him know if he was not properly lined up with the airport. My guess is he would have succeeded if the tower had been open. But the biggest error of all was the pilot's poor fuel management. He had to know that he was low on fuel when he arrived at Montgomery, which is probably why he stayed so low looking for the airport, even though he should have been climbing on the missed approach. And yet, he never told anyone. When he did finally tell the controller, he only had 1 minute and 45 seconds of fuel left. When asked how much fuel he had, he said something like very few minutes or maybe 10 minutes, I couldn't quite tell. So he actually had a very accurate understanding of how much fuel he had left. With the original fuel gauges in the Cessna 210s, it would have been very hard to tell the difference between, say, half an hour of fuel and a few minutes of fuel. I upgraded my T210 with a JPI engine analyzer, and I added a fuel totalizer, and it was so accurate that it was often within plus or minus a half gallon of fuel, and we could determine that each time we filled up the plane. I'm guessing this pilot also had a fuel totalizer and knew that he had only a few minutes of fuel left. When the engine did quit, the pilot was unable to follow the controller's instructions to turn east toward Miramar, where he might have just barely made it to the runway. Instead, he circled before heading west. Now, I can only imagine how terrifying those last 2 minutes were and how difficult it would have been to follow any instructions. When we panic, our brain narrows down, and things we could easily do when we're relaxed become impossible to do in an emergency unless you spent lots of time drilling what to do in an emergency. Now, I'm often asked if things like this could happen to high-time pilots, what chance do I have as a low-time pilot? In both this crash and the Cessna 340 crash we talked about in episode 301, both pilots demonstrated some lack of instrument flying skills. So how do you stay safe? Practice, practice, practice. Practice using your GPS until you know it well, and apparently this pilot had some difficulties with his. Practice your instrument flying doing all kinds of approaches, and practice your emergency skills. I'll be back in a moment. First, let me ask you, are you flying an airplane equipped with the Garmin G1000 Perspective or the G3000 or G5000? If so, do you know everything there is to know about the system and its autopilot? I'm sure you've read the POH for your airplane from cover to cover, but have you done that for your avionics? Even if you know a lot about the G1000 or G3000 and the autopilot, there's probably more to learn, and you certainly don't want to be struggling to figure out the nuances of the system as you're flying in the clouds. People who've read my books tell me they are much easier to read than the Garmin manuals, plus they have a great index, so it's easy to look up any feature you're trying to figure out. To truly master a plane, you have to also master the avionics. So call to get my Max Truscotts G1000 and Perspective Glass Cockpit Handbook or my Max Truscotts G3000 and G5000 Glass Cockpit Handbook. The former is $34.95 and the latter is $44.95. Commit to doing that now and call 800-247-6553 to order. I hope you enjoyed our 3 episodes this week focused on recent accidents. I decided to do them because I'm grounded here at home for the week. Hopefully we'll be back to our normal format next week with news and other topics. And just a reminder that I love hearing from you, and I read many of your emails on the show. If you'd like to send me a message, just go out to aviationnewstalk.com, click on Contact at the top of the page. That's absolutely the best way to send me a message. And of course, I also want to thank everyone who supports the show in one of the following ways. We love it when you join the club and sign up at aviationnewstalk.com/awesome to support the show financially. You can also do that at aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. We also love it when you leave a 5-star review on whatever app that you're listening to us on now. And of course, if you're in the market for a headset, please please consider buying a Lightspeed headset and using one of the links in our show notes, because if you use those links, they will donate to help support the show. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up. And remember that you can always go around.
You can always go around. If it don't look right coming down, don't wait until your side's maybe sliding upside down. You can always